Hello, and welcome to episode 28 of the Positive Thinking and the Meaning of Life podcast. My name is, as ever, Marcus Freestone, and this is part 5 of our series on negative thinking, which is about the work of Colin Wilson. And before I start, I don't want to seem to be jumping on any populist bandwagons, but I would like to dedicate this episode to Stephen Hawking. And for Americans, you'll notice there's no S on the end of his name. Anyway, I read The Brief History of Time in my mid-20s. It had a profound effect on me. It's one of the best written and most easily comprehensible books on hardcore physics that I've ever read, out of all the hundreds I read back then. And if ever there's an example of positive thinking and of living a life embodied by all the things that I'm going to talk about from Colin Wilson, then it was Stephen Hawking, somebody who should have died in his early 20s, lived to the age of 76. And I'm pleased, as a fan of his work, that most of the media seem to be focusing equally on his scientific achievements as well as his disability and his fame and all that, because he really was one of the most important scientists of the last 100 years, one of the most important people of the last 100 years. If you don't know anything about physics, if you look into what he did, he made massive contributions to the Big Bang Theory, not just the TV program, the actual scientific theory, and black holes. He was a pioneer of working on that and on the work to unite relativity with quantum theory and work towards a theory of everything, which is the ultimate goal of physics. So I'd like to dedicate this episode to him, because if ever there's an example of positive thinking and leading a life of the mind and, living life to the maximum, then it was him. So R.I.P. Stephen Hawking. So Colin Wilson was an English writer and thinker. He was born in 1931 and he died a few years ago at the age of 82. He kept writing till the end despite having a severe stroke, and I read at least 2 of the books he wrote after he had the stroke in his mid-70s, and there was absolutely no sign of any cognitive impairment whatsoever. He was as sharp and incisive and as good a writer as ever. He wrote over 100 books. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, he did extensive lecture tours in America, Australia, and all over the world, and had a couple of periods of being extremely famous, but he mainly shunned all that and spent most of his life after his first book came out in the 50s, avoiding the press and living a quiet life with his wife and kids in a remote cottage in Cornwall, where they lived to the end of their lives. And I first came across the work of Colin Wilson in my early 20s, when I was sort of looking to understand my own brain and why it didn't do the things that I wanted it to. And he's been a huge influence on me and continues to be so.